Hello everyone, and welcome to the 50th episode of Analyzing Evil, featuring Bill the Butcher from Gangs of New York. Based on the real-world William Bill the Butcher Poole, our William Bill the Butcher Cutting is a fictitious echo of his real-world counterpart, deriving many of his values and principles from his inspiration, yet embellishing much more in terms of actions and historical accuracy. By all accounts, William Poole, a renowned pugilist known for his brutal and dirty fighting style, a man who involved himself in gangs and racist politics, was a terrible person. Yet it's never been said that Poole was a murderer. William Cutting, on the other hand, our cinematic Bill the Butcher, dropped the pugilistic moniker in favor of a murderous one, and his hegemony over the criminal underworld of New York is secured by a swath of brutal actions that see him garnering respect and tribute from politicians all the way down to the common people of the Five Points neighborhood. Due to the fact that the Bill the Butcher we see in the film is much different than the real one, I won't be comparing the two in this video. As though they might share some similar views and aspects of their brutality, much of Bill's character and backstory was altered from that of his real-world counterpart, and the events that take place in the film never transpired in reality. That being said, though this film is still historically accurate in some ways, the book that this film is based upon, which shares the same name as the film, delves not only into the life of William Poole, but the real history behind that time period in New York City. And if you're interested in learning about both Poole and this subject, I recommend you give it a read. Before we begin, I'd first like to talk about our sponsor for this video, Noom. I've struggled for years with yo-yo dieting, on and off gym attendance, and a sedentary lifestyle, and it's definitely started to take its toll on my overall health. The path to a healthy lifestyle can be found in your habits, and developing good ones can be quite the struggle. That's where Noom comes in. Noom is a revolutionary program designed to change the way you think about your health, helping you to break old habits and develop new healthy ones. Noom does this by changing the way you think about you, and it does so through daily lessons, consistent nutritional planning, and the help of real-life coaches to help you stay focused on your goals. Where other programs focus on flashy headlines that promise you quick results, Noom is focused on getting you consistent results over time, ensuring that you'll not only lose weight, but keep it off. Weight isn't the only thing that Noom is focused on though, and by following their program, you can expect to see an improvement in your stress levels, sleep patterns, and general well-being. I've been using their program for about a month now, and I have lost weight, but more importantly, I'm sleeping better, and I've started to develop better habits. And while their lessons played a big part in that, one of the best tools they have that has kept me on track is their meal tracker, which helps you to set limits with how many calories you eat and the types of calories that you consume. The best part is, using Noom only takes about 10 minutes out of your day, and that 10 minutes can change your entire life for the better. Right now, you can go to noom.com/vile to take your free 30-second quiz that will establish your nutritional profile and get you started on a journey to a healthier you. Noom is by far the most effective and efficient health-based program I've come across, and I can't recommend it enough. Start taking charge of your health and go to noom.com/vile and take your free 30-second quiz today. Thank you, Noom, for sponsoring this video. Now, without further ado, let's begin. We don't receive too much information about Bill's backstory, but we do know that he was raised in an asylum, and since he's 47 at the time of the time skip, that would mean he was born the year of, or the year after, his father's death in 1814. He knows who his father was, and says that he died fighting the British during a battle in 1814, but otherwise, we aren't given much to go off of, as far as a family history goes. Who knows when Bill moved to the Five Points area? Perhaps the asylum he was raised in was located here. But regardless of when he moved there, Five Points already had a reputation as being a filthy neighborhood, even before he was born, one where a congregation of many peoples of many backgrounds and poor financial standing came together to dwell in squalor and debauchery. Crime was rampant in this section of the city, and though Bill eventually learned the butcher's trade, he ended up succumbing to his surroundings, getting himself involved with the Bowery Boys, a nativist street gang that would later become affiliated with the Know-Nothings, a quasi-secret society dedicated to keeping America a place reserved only for people who were born on its soil. It's unknown how Bill developed his xenophobic and racist views, but we can assume that at the very least, his father's death at the hands of the British had a hand in developing these views. But I'm sure the majority of his ill feelings toward the so-called filthy immigrants infesting his shores manifested in full force when he became affiliated with 5 Points, a place where he got to witness firsthand what chaos life can bring in a city as enormous as New York. Bill was a devout Protestant Christian, and incredibly proud to be an American, and as he saw it, he was witnessing the degradation of society, and among many things that were causing this, he found one to blame in particular: the influence of foreigners, outsiders who clung to the ways of the Europeans, the very people whom his father, and his father's father, had fled in order to practice their religion without the fear of oppression. There were of course the Africans, and the Asians, but none were so worse in Bill's mind than the Irish, the people who were swarming into his country and devouring every decent thing in sight, driving down wages, and eroding the values of his homeland. A horde of savages sent by the Pope sitting on his golden throne in Rome. And that's where his association with gang life began, with his desire to challenge the increasing Irish presence in his country and cleanse it through might, just as his own family had done many years ago when they repelled the British. And that's what brings us to the beginning of the film, where Bill's alliance of nativist street gangs does battle with Valen's federation of Irish gangs. Dressed in his battle attire, which consists of a brown skullcap and a red, white, and blue sash that complement his day clothes, Bill gives us a vicious and brutal display, cutting down numerous men with the wicked tools of his trade before he strikes down his mortal foe. Something that betrays his vicious nature is the fact that Bill is actually quite the gentleman at times, and a noble one at that, as here we see that he respects his fallen enemy, a formidable and noble enemy who once shamed him, a shame he answered by offering one of his eyes to him, and as this enemy lay dying, he tenderly caresses his head before he quickly ends his suffering, handing him a knife so his passage across the river Styx might be more bearable. After this, he ensures that his body isn't defiled, and even sees to it that his son be taken care of, and even years after his death, he assures that when they celebrate their victory, Bill and his men honor their fallen foe as an enemy worth fighting for. Again, he's still quite vicious, but he has a certain amount of respect for his enemy, at least an enemy he deems worthy of respect. And though this scene is a bloody battle, it is just that, a crossing of swords that was agreed upon by both parties. And the fact that Bill respects and honors this agreement shows that at the very least, his evil is usurped by his honor. And as this is bloodshed that was mutually agreed upon by both parties, we can find no evil with the battle itself. The reason for this battle, though, is rather horrific, as each side is fighting to gain supremacy over the other in this neighborhood. The Irish's cause here is much more noble, considering they're attempting to live without having to suffer the wrath of their nativist foes, which is self-defense. But I'm sure these men are guilty of their fair share of crimes as well, so they're not totally innocent. But Bill's cause, on the other hand, is only self-defense in his own mind and the minds of his compatriots, as their idea of defending their land is to go on the offensive and prevent these people from establishing themselves in America, purely because of their beliefs, who they are, and where they came from. And as far as reasons to fight a battle, that has to be up there as one of the more heinous ones. 16 years after this event, we find a Bill the Butcher well-dressed, well-mannered, and just as racist as ever. Not quite a Confederate in this time of Civil War, but certainly an anti-unionist, a position that was inspired by the racism he's held within him for many years now. Yet where he once only had the might of a small-time street gang, he now has the power to back up his bigotry, and he's actively attempting to thwart the immigration of the Irish into America, politically and physically, as we see that he campaigns to ensure that nativist candidates are elected, and he has his men throw bricks at these people as they come off their boats. Bricks that he would sooner have replaced with guns if he had the chance. Though Bill might detest the rot he sees infecting his homeland, he still takes his pleasures in it, finding comfort in the kingdom of chaos and wealth that he oversees. It would also seem that he isn't above bending his principles to suit his own aims, as he's willing to employ Irish in his ranks, though he still berates them at any chance that he can get. And he gives a partial explanation for this to Amsterdam, where he tells him that in order to stand up against the rising of the tide, he's ensured that he's put himself in a position to subjugate the peoples of his neighborhood financially, which requires working with them. In this way, Bill is a pragmatist, adopting an "if I can't keep them out, I might as well make them useful" mentality. And he knows the value of good press, and how to manipulate a crowd into doing what he desires. Operating a successful network of tributaries isn't his only method of controlling his kingdom, though, as there is yet another tool in Bill's arsenal that he employs with profound effect: fear. Pegging fear as the reason he's lived so long, Bill explains to Amsterdam that it's his brutality that's kept him in his position. If someone steals from him, he cuts off their hands. If someone offends him, he cuts out their tongue. And if someone rises against him, he cuts off his head and sticks it on a pike, raising it high up for all to see. We see that the fear he sows isn't always planned or warranted either, as we have at least one example of Bill stabbing a man for betting too low in a game of cards with him, a minor annoyance that Bill answers with a cruel show of force. What bolsters the fear he instills in others is the way he carries himself. He's adept at hand-to-hand combat, a terrifying sight to behold in the midst of battle, and he's shown to be partially literate, if not educated. But Bill is without a doubt an intelligent man who knows how to get the most use out of his own skills. Bill has a confidence about him that shows he holds no fear of anyone or anything, and his charisma is often shown in his dramatics. He's intimidating enough when he's in his normal everyday wear, but even more so when he's plying his trade, looking all the more menacing covered in blood, and carrying instruments of butchery in each hand. But behind all of this is an intense one-eyed stare that hides the ferocity lurking just beneath his gaze, a ferocity that he can manifest as casually as one might drink from a glass of water. He's not all cruelty, though, and we do see him offering a section of meat to an elderly woman at one point, and Jenny says that he took her in out of what seems to be genuine care, if she's indeed telling the truth, even stating to Amsterdam that Bill never took her sexually until she offered herself to him. However, that's about the short and tall of it for Bill's virtuous deeds as far as we know, and this film is filled with numerous examples of his cruelty and barbarous ways, and who knows how many people he's killed that we aren't aware of. To be fair, 2 of the acts we do see in the film are done in self-defense, as when the Irishman and Amsterdam are trying to murder him, their deaths and maiming are brought about because of their own attempts on Bill's life. But stabbing the hand of the man playing cards with him, maiming Amsterdam once he'd already downed him, pinning Johnny up on a fence, and murdering the newly elected sheriff were all actions taken by a cruel and unhinged man with a volatile temper and sadistic bent to his nature, one that can't handle the reality he's living in and how little control he has over it. Some of these acts have an odd tenderness to them as well, which only enhances the sadistic cruelty of this man. In the end, Bill goes down fighting the fight he's been engaged in for much of his life, a losing fight that sought to oppress others for no good reason other than the differences they shared in their heritage and their religion, a perceived erosion of the values he held dear that caused him to live a life filled with hatred that ultimately spelled his undoing. And at this end, who was Bill the Butcher? He was a man born into a world of hardship, one that took both his parents from him at a young age, sending him to be raised amongst other unfortunate children in an asylum, one which could never replace the family he lost. Though this may be true, Bill was told of his father's exploits, and was proud of his father's involvement in making his country into what it is, a man who fought for the great nation he felt fortunate enough to have been born in, knowledge that spurned a deep love and passion for his country. However, with that love came a hate just as strong, which was transformed into a distrust of outsiders, the foreigners who had sought to stop this land's creation, the European overlords who dared to set foot on the land that his family had fought tooth and nail for to secure their freedom in. But now that the guns had been hung up and the battles won, a new enemy raced to the shores of America, an infestation that threatened to tear apart this fledgling society that his family had shed their blood for. So Bill developed racism and xenophobia, and began to take action by building an army of his own, fighting against these hordes with every resource at his disposal. And once this fight had been won, he placed himself as the stalwart arm propping up the floodgate that he believed was preventing further harm to his country. However, this is nothing but a delusion, and Bill was in reality a ruthless, brutal, and bigoted crime lord whose twisted views drove him into taking actions that caused the harm, endangerment, or death of hundreds of people simply because they had a desire to start a new and prosperous life for themselves, just as his own family had done long ago. Menacing, psychotic, and filled to the brim with a quiet and all-consuming rage, Bill the Butcher was a sadistic and remorseless murderer, a man who easily disregarded the lives of others in favor of his chosen people, a man who would rather cut off the hand asking for his help than extend his own to give respite to the needy, a man so blinded by racism that he lives a life of constant hatred, seething over the perceived downfall of his country at the hands of foreign scoundrels who seek to undo everything his people had built. Bill the Butcher was certainly a product of his environment, and he wasn't alone in having these views. He was nurtured and conditioned to hate these people, to pin his suffering and the suffering of the ones he loved on the people he had been told were his enemy and the enemy of everything dear to him. Though this may be true, a man takes his own actions, and that doesn't excuse his cruel behavior and many crimes. And though we may be able to understand how and why a man like Bill the Butcher came to develop views and principles that are in stark contrast to any sensible idea of good, he must be condemned as nothing more than a murderous villain and an agent of evil. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Analyzing Evil, and I hope you've enjoyed. What are your thoughts on Bill? Did I miss anything? Let me know down below, and leave a suggestion for a villain you'd like to see featured in a future episode while you're at it. If you liked this video and want to see more like it appearing in your feed, click the subscribe button to keep up on the latest episodes, and feel free to leave a like while you're at it. Thank you once again to all of my existing subscribers for your continued and incredible support. If you'd like to support the channel even further, consider signing up as a patron over on Patreon. You can find a link to Patreon down in the description. Thank you to everyone who signed up so far, and a most vile thank you to those whose names you're seeing on screen now. Join the channel's Discord server to interact with myself and the community, and follow me on the social media platforms listed in the description for occasional updates on the channel. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you soon.